He left me alone on our wedding night. I found him with my bridesmaid. My life felt like a dream come true. One of those dreams you're afraid to wake up from. I was about to marry James Mitchell, the man I had pictured for years as the father of my children, my life partner, my safest haven. Everything was prepared with meticulous care. The flowers imported from Ecuador, the menu tasted 3 times, the music playlist curated with songs that meant something to us, even the small details only we understood, like the quote from our favorite movie engraved inside our wedding bands. My mother cried tears of joy as I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed in my white Vera Wang gown, thinking that I had finally found true happiness. The lace sleeves, the cathedral train, the delicate pearl buttons running down my back. Everything was perfect. What I didn't know was that this wedding, which was supposed to seal a love story, would actually mark the beginning of my greatest tragedy. From the start, I knew I couldn't walk down the aisle without my best friend, Christina Davies, by my side. She was more than just a friend. She was my soul sister, my confidant, the only person who knew every corner of my heart. We'd met freshman year at UVA, roommates thrown together by chance who became family by choice. She'd been there through my worst breakups, my father's death, my quarter-life crisis when I almost dropped out of architecture school. That's why I chose her as my maid of honor without a second thought. No one questioned my decision. Everyone knew how deep our connection was. She smiled with what looked like genuine tenderness as she helped me with my veil and made sure the train was perfect. What I didn't know was that behind her warm hazel eyes, a dark secret was hiding, a secret that would destroy my life from the inside out. We wanted an intimate wedding, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. That's why we chose Willowbrook Estate, an elegant property in the rolling hills of Virginia, about 2 hours outside of Richmond. The place was magical, with a stately stone manor built in 1890, cozy guest rooms with 4-poster beds and fireplaces, and a grand hall with vaulted ceilings and enormous arched windows that led in the warm light of the setting sun. The grounds featured blooming gardens with rose arbors, a small lake with swans, and ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss. There, surrounded by our families and closest friends, we dreamed of celebrating our love and starting a new life together. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything felt harmonious, orchestrated by fate itself. But that same place, that beautiful estate, would soon witness the most painful collapse of my existence. We had rented the entire estate for the weekend so that our parents, the wedding party, and close family could stay the night before and after the wedding. We wanted it to be more than just an event. We wanted it to be a weekend of togetherness, shared laughter, and joyful anticipation. The night before, we all had dinner together on the stone terrace lit by hundreds of string lights, with soft jazz playing from hidden speakers and glasses of wine in our hands. James seemed calm, even affectionate, pulling me close and kissing my temple when he thought no one was watching. Christina never left my side, just as always, laughing at my jokes, adjusting my hair, taking candid photos on her phone. No one suspected that behind all that apparent peace, a storm was brewing that would change our lives forever. That night, I went to bed with a heart full of hope, mentally replaying every detail of the day, convinced that I had finally found my person, my home, my happiness. I fell asleep late, feeling that mixture of nervous excitement and disbelief that something this good was actually happening to me. The next morning would be my wedding day. I was about to become Mrs. Mitchell. I fell asleep smiling, picturing the moment I would walk toward James in my white dress. If you're enjoying this story of heartbreak and ultimate redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button for Bridal Confessions. We bring you the most dramatic, emotional, and real wedding stories every single week. Your support helps this channel grow and brings these stories to people who need to hear them. Now let's get back to Rachel's wedding day. The next morning, the first rays of sun came through the lace curtains of my room, and I woke up with an energy I hadn't felt since I was a little girl on Christmas morning. My mother came in first, already crying, carrying a tray with coffee and croissants. "My baby is getting married today," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Then came my sister, then the bridesmaids, and finally Christina, bringing a bouquet of white peonies with a smile that I now remember as a perfectly crafted mask. I felt grateful, excited, and secure. I couldn't have known that nothing was real anymore. The morning passed in a blur of champagne mimosas, makeup artists, hairstylists, and photographers capturing every moment. Christina was by my side through all of it, holding my hand when I got emotional, making everyone laugh with her stories, being the perfect maid of honor. When it was time to put on my dress, she was the one who carefully buttoned each pearl button down my back, her fingers steady and sure. "You look like a princess," she whispered, her voice catching slightly. I thought she was just emotional for me. Now I know she was probably thinking about James, about what they'd been hiding, about the life she was stealing from me. When my father came to get me, his eyes went glassy with tears. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," he said, offering his arm. "James is the luckiest man alive." If only he had known how unlucky we all were about to become. The ceremony was set for 5 in the evening, timed perfectly so the golden hour light would stream through the garden as I walked down the aisle. The chairs were arranged in neat rows on the lawn, white fabric and roses tied to each one. A string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as guests found their seats. The rose arbor at the end of the aisle was covered in white roses, peonies, and trailing ivy. Everything looked like it came from a magazine spread. When the music changed to Vitamin String Quartet's version of "Marry Me," my father squeezed my hand. "Ready, sweetheart?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump of emotion in my throat. The doors opened and there, at the end of that rose-petal-strewn aisle, stood James. He wore a navy suit with a white rose boutonniere, his dark hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes glistening with what looked like tears. He was so handsome it hurt. And he was mine. Or so I thought. I walked toward him, feeling like I was floating, barely aware of the faces turning to watch me, the smiles, the whispered compliments. All I could see was James. My father placed my hand in his, and James squeezed gently, but there was something in his grip that felt off. Too tight? Too brief? I pushed the thought away. Wedding day nerves, I told myself. We're both just overwhelmed. The officiant, an old family friend, began the ceremony with warmth and humor, talking about love and partnership and the journey we were beginning. James and I had written our own vows. When it was my turn, I looked into his eyes and spoke from my heart. I promised to love him through every season, to choose him every day, to build a life full of laughter and adventure and safety. My voice shook, but the words were true. I meant every syllable. When James spoke his vows, his voice was steady, but his eyes kept darting away from mine, landing somewhere over my left shoulder. Later, I would realize he was looking at Christina, standing just behind me in her pale blue bridesmaid dress. But in that moment, I just thought he was nervous about speaking in front of everyone. His vows were beautiful, talking about how I'd changed his life, how he couldn't imagine a future without me. He even choked up slightly, and people in the audience sniffled. When the officiant asked if we accepted each other, I didn't hesitate for a second. My voice was shaky but firm as I said, "I do," my eyes full of love as I looked at James. He also said, "I do," with a smile, though for a moment I thought his expression dimmed right after he said it, like a shadow passing across his face. I just figured it was the gravity of the moment, that overwhelming realization that this was real, that we were actually doing this. We kissed to the sound of applause and cheers, surrounded by white flowers and tears of joy. In that instant, I believed it was all worth it, that our love was real and lasting. The reception was exactly as we had imagined it. The great hall of the manor had been transformed with thousands of tiny lights, long tables decorated with candles and low arrangements of white roses, and a band set up in the corner ready to play our first dance song. We ate a dinner of filet mignon and lobster tail, drank expensive wine, and listened to toasts from our parents and friends. My father spoke about how he'd known from the moment he met James that he was the one for me. James's mother talked about how she'd prayed for years that her son would find someone as special as me. Christina gave a toast too, standing up with a glass of champagne and a warm smile. She talked about our friendship, about how she'd watched me fall in love with James, about how she'd never seen me happier. To Rachel and James, she said, raising her glass, may your love story be everything you've dreamed of and more. Everyone clinked glasses and drank. I caught her eye and mouthed, thank you, feeling so grateful for her presence in my life. She smiled back, and I swear there was something in that smile I couldn't read. Something that looked almost like guilt. But I was too happy to analyze it. The evening continued with dancing, laughter, and joy. James and I had our first dance to At Last by Etta James, swaying together while everyone watched. He held me close, but there was a distance in the way he held me, as if part of him wasn't really there. I felt it but pushed it away, told myself I was overthinking, that I should just enjoy this perfect moment. The party went on for hours. People danced, told stories, took photos. Christina seemed to be having a great time, dancing with groomsmen, chatting with aunts and uncles. At one point, I saw her and James talking in a corner, their heads close together. When I walked over, they both smiled brightly, and James immediately pulled me into a hug. Just thanking Christina for everything she did to make today perfect, he said. I hugged her too, feeling lucky to have such wonderful people in my life. Around 11 p.m., guests started drifting off to their rooms or heading home if they lived locally. My mother hugged me tight, crying again. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You and James are going to have such a beautiful life together. My chest felt so full it might burst. This was everything I'd ever wanted. Finally, around midnight, James and I excused ourselves. The bridal suite was on the third floor of the manor, a spacious room with exposed beams, a stone fireplace, and a four-poster bed draped with white linens. Rose petals were scattered across the floor and bed, candles flickered on every surface, and champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket. It was the most romantic setting I'd ever seen. I closed the door softly, turning to James with a smile, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. This was it. Our first night as husband and wife. The moment we'd been waiting for. But James didn't move toward me. He walked to the window, loosening his tie with jerky movements. James, I said softly, walking toward him. Are you okay? He turned, and his face was strange, closed off in a way I'd never seen before. I'm exhausted, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. His tone was flat, almost irritated, as if I was bothering him by asking. This whole day has been overwhelming. I just need to sleep. I stood frozen, trying to process his words. Sleep? On our wedding night? I thought we could. I mean, don't you want to? I couldn't even finish the sentence, feeling stupid and rejected and confused all at once. Rachel, please don't make this difficult, he said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I'm tired. Can't you understand that? I've been performing all day. I just need space. Performing. That word hit me like a slap. Our wedding had been a performance? I watched in disbelief as he walked to the small daybed that sat near the window, clearly meant as just decorative seating. He sat down, took off his shoes, and lay back fully clothed. Good night, he said, turning his face to the wall. He didn't look at me, didn't kiss me goodnight, didn't explain. He just turned off the lamp on the side table, leaving the room lit only by the dying candles, and closed his eyes. I stood there in my wedding dress, in the middle of our bridal suite, feeling invisible on the most important night of my life. The room smelled of roses, but inside my chest, everything was withering. I slowly walked to the four-poster bed, sat on the edge, and stared at nothing, trying to understand what had just happened. Tears started falling without my permission, silent tears that I tried to muffle so I wouldn't seem pathetic or needy. I carefully took off my dress, hanging it in the closet with shaking hands, and changed into the white silk nightgown I'd bought specifically for tonight. A nightgown no one would see. I lay down on the bed alone, pulling the covers up to my chin, and stared at the ceiling. The candles slowly burned out, one by one, until the room was dark except for the moonlight coming through the windows. I could hear James breathing steadily across the room, apparently able to sleep without any trouble. And that's how I spent my first night as a wife, alone, confused, heartbroken, feeling like I'd made some terrible mistake, but not understanding what it was. I don't know how long I stayed awake, staring at the patterns the moonlight made on the ceiling, wishing this was all a nightmare I could wake up from. At some point, exhaustion took over and I must have fallen asleep, because suddenly I was jolting awake, disoriented. The room was pitch black now, all the candles long since extinguished. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. I sat up, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't immediately identify. Then I heard it. A muffled sound coming from somewhere else in the manor. A low groan, almost like someone in pain. I looked over at the daybed where James had been sleeping. It was empty. My stomach dropped. Where was he? I got out of bed slowly, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. I pulled on the silk robe that matched my nightgown and walked to the door, opening it carefully. The hallway was dark and silent, lit only by small sconces along the walls. I stood there for a moment, listening. There it was again. That sound. A groan, but not of pain. My brain didn't want to process what kind of sound it actually was. It was coming from down the hall, from one of the other guest rooms. My heart started racing as my feet moved almost on their own, carrying me down the hallway toward the sound. I knew which room it was coming from even before I reached the door. Room 7. Christina's room. No, I told myself. No, this isn't happening. There's an explanation. Maybe she's sick. Maybe James went to check on her. Maybe I'm mishearing everything. But deep down, I already knew. My body knew before my mind would accept it. I stopped in front of Christina's door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. I could hear it more clearly now. The rhythmic creaking of a bed. Heavy breathing. A woman's voice making sounds I recognized, sounds I'd heard Christina make through thin dorm walls in college when she'd brought guys home. And then, cutting through everything else, I heard it. James's voice. Deep, unmistakable, saying her name. Christina. God, Christina. Everything inside me shattered. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there with my hand on the doorknob, frozen in the worst moment of my life. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Not James. Not Christina. Not on my wedding night. Not in the same building where our families were sleeping, where the remnants of our perfect wedding still decorated the halls downstairs. But it was real. The sounds were real. His voice speaking her name was real. And suddenly, everything from the day made sense. His distance during the ceremony. The way he'd looked past me during his vows. His rejection of me in our bridal suite. He hadn't been tired. He'd been waiting for this. Waiting for me to fall asleep so he could go to her. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds? Minutes? Time felt suspended. Every sound from that room was a knife in my chest. Finally, my body moved on autopilot. I pushed the door open. The room was lit by a single bedside lamp, casting a golden glow over the scene that would be burned into my memory forever. Christina's bed. My husband. My best friend. Tangled together, skin against skin, her legs wrapped around him. They didn't see me at first, too lost in each other. Christina's head was thrown back, her long blonde hair spread across the pillows. James was above her, his back to me, but I could see everything. I could see his hand in her hair, could see the way they moved together, could see years of trust and love crumbling to dust. I must have made a sound, a gasp or a sob, because suddenly James froze. His head whipped around, and our eyes met. For a moment, we all just stared at each other. James's face went from pleasure to shock to fear in the span of seconds. Christina scrambled to pull the sheet up, her face pale, her eyes wide. No one spoke. The silence was deafening. Then James moved, quickly climbing off Christina and grabbing his boxers from the floor. "Rachel," he started, his voice hoarse. "Rachel, wait, I can explain. The word came out as barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the room. Explain what, exactly? Explain why you're fucking my best friend on our wedding night. Christina had started crying, mascara running down her face in black streaks. Rachel, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for this to happen? I repeated, my voice rising now, shaking with rage and grief. How do you accidentally end up in bed together? How do you accidentally betray me on my wedding night? James pulled on his pants, his hands shaking. Rachel, please, let me explain. This isn't what you think, then what is it, James? I screamed, not caring who I woke up, not caring about anything anymore. Tell me what this is. Because it looks like my husband is fucking my maid of honor 5 hours after we said our vows. We're in love, Christina blurted out, and the room went silent. Those 3 words hung in the air like poison. James turned to look at her, something like panic in his eyes. Christina, don't know, she said, wrapping the sheet tighter around herself, tears still streaming. She deserves to know. We're in love, Rachel. It's been happening for months. We tried to stop. We tried to stay away from each other, but we couldn't. We just couldn't. Months. They'd been doing this for months. While I was planning our wedding. While I was choosing flowers and tasting cakes and dreaming of our future. While I was buying a dress and writing vows and believing in forever. How long? I asked, my voice deadly calm now. How long have you been fucking my fiancé? Christina looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Since March, she whispered. March. 6 months ago. Right around the time Christina had offered to help with wedding planning, to be more involved, to support me through the stress. She'd been sleeping with James the whole time. The engagement party? I asked, remembering. Christina nodded, tears falling onto the white sheet. It started that night. After everyone left. He walked me to my car and it just happened. It just happened, I repeated numbly. And then it kept just happening for 6 months. Through the dress shopping. Through the bridal shower. Through every single moment you pretended to be my friend. I am your friend, Christina sobbed. I love you, Rachel. I never wanted to hurt you. You're fucking my husband on my wedding night. I screamed. How is that not wanting to hurt me? James finally spoke up, running his hands through his hair. Rachel, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I do love you, I do, but I also love Christina, and I don't know how to stop, I said, holding up my hand. Just stop talking. I looked at both of them, these 2 people I'd trusted most in the world, and I felt nothing but disgust. I want you both out of my sight. Now. Get dressed and get out of this room. Rachel, James started. No. I screamed, and they both jumped. I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I stood in the hallway, shaking violently, trying to breathe. I could hear them moving around in the room, getting dressed, whispering frantically to each other. My legs gave out and I slid down the wall, sitting on the floor of the hallway in my silk nightgown, staring at nothing. This was my wedding night. I was supposed to be in bed with my husband, happy and loved and starting our life together. Instead, I was sitting in a hallway at 3 a.m, my entire life destroyed. The door opened and they came out, both fully dressed now, looking wrecked. James's shirt was buttoned wrong. Christina's dress was inside out. They stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to say or do. I looked up at them from the floor, and the looks on their faces, the guilt and fear and shame, it didn't make me feel better. It just made everything hurt more. Did you ever love me? I asked James, my voice small. He looked at me, and for the first time that night, his eyes filled with tears. Yes, he said. I did. I do. Rachel, I'm so confused, I don't know what I want. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of this house. Both of you. I don't care where you go. Get out before I wake everyone up and tell them exactly what you did. Christina started crying harder. Rachel, please, can we talk about this in the morning? Can we if you're not out of this building in 10 minutes, I'm going to start knocking on doors. I'm going to wake up every single person here and tell them what you did. Your choice. They looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Then James nodded. Okay, we'll go. But Rachel, please, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out what to do. We're getting divorced, I said flatly. That's what we're going to do. Now get out of my sight. They walked past me down the hallway, and I didn't watch them go. I heard their footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door of the manor open and close. Then silence. I sat there on the floor for a long time, until the sky started turning gray with the first hints of dawn. Then I stood up, walked back to the bridal suite, and locked the door. I looked around at all the romantic decoration, the rose petals, the candles, the champagne. This room that was supposed to witness the beginning of our life together had instead witnessed the end. I fell onto the bed and finally let myself sob, deep wrenching sobs that shook my whole body, crying for the loss of everything I'd believed in, everything I'd thought was true. I cried for the friendship I'd cherished for 9 years. I cried for the man I'd planned to spend my life with. I cried for the naive girl who'd walked down that aisle yesterday thinking she was getting her happy ending. That girl was gone now. By the time the sun fully rose, painting the room in harsh morning light, I was all cried out. I felt empty, hollowed out, but also strangely calm. I knew what I had to do. I got up, washed my face, and pulled on jeans and a sweater. Then I went downstairs to face whatever came next. The dining room was filling up with guests who'd stayed overnight, people helping themselves to the breakfast buffet that had been set up, fresh fruit, pastries, coffee, scrambled eggs. My mother was there, chatting with James's parents. My sister, some cousins, a few friends. They all looked happy, relaxed, glowing with the aftermath of a beautiful wedding. No one knew yet that the marriage they'd celebrated was already over. "Rachel," my mother exclaimed when she saw me, hurrying over. "Good morning, sweetheart. How was your first night as Mrs. Mitchell?" The question hit me like a physical blow, but I managed to keep my face neutral. "Where's James?" my sister asked, looking around. "Still sleeping. Can everyone please sit down?" I said, my voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. "I have something I need to tell you all." The room went quiet. People looked at each other in confusion, but slowly they all sat down at the tables. My mother's smile faded as she looked at my face. "Rachel? What's wrong?" I stood at the front of the room, in front of the fireplace, and looked at all these people who'd come to celebrate my wedding. My family. James's family. Our friends. People who'd traveled from across the country to be here. And I told them the truth. Last night, around 3 a.m., I woke up and realized James wasn't in our room. I began, my voice steady despite the way my hands were shaking. I heard sounds coming from another room in this house. When I went to investigate, I found my husband in bed with my maid of honor. With Christina. They told me they've been having an affair for 6 months. Gasps filled the room. My mother's face went white. James's mother let out a sound like she'd been punched. My sister stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's not possible," someone said. "Rachel, are you sure?" "I'm sure," I cut them off. "I saw them together. They admitted it. They told me they're in love." More silence, heavy and suffocating. Then everyone started talking at once. Where was James? Where was Christina? Were they still here? What was I going to do? My father stood up, his face red with fury. "I'm going to kill him," he said, and my uncle had to physically restrain him. James's father looked devastated, like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "I don't understand," he kept saying. "I don't understand how my son could do this." "Neither did I. I'm filing for divorce immediately," I announced, and my voice didn't shake at all. "I wanted you all to hear it from me. I'm sorry that you came all this way for a wedding that's already over. But I thought you deserved to know the truth rather than hearing rumors or getting half the story." My mother was crying now, coming over to wrap me in a hug. "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, my baby." James's mother approached slowly, her face streaked with tears. "Rachel, I am so sorry. I don't know what to say. What my son did is unforgivable. If there's anything I can do, there's nothing anyone can do," I said quietly. "It's done. They made their choices, and now I'm making mine. I'm leaving this place today, and I'm never looking back." People tried to talk to me after that, to comfort me, to ask questions, but I couldn't handle it. I went back upstairs, packed my things in the suitcase I'd brought, and called an Uber. I left Willowbrook Estate the same way I'd arrived, except everything had changed. I was a different person now. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and explanations I didn't want to give. The marriage could be annulled since it had never been consummated, my lawyer explained. It would be like it never happened. Legally anyway. Emotionally, the scars would last a lot longer. I moved back in with my parents temporarily, unable to face the apartment James and I had shared. I took a leave of absence from my architecture firm, telling them I needed time to deal with a family emergency. I couldn't explain that I was falling apart, that some days I couldn't get out of bed, that I felt betrayed by the two people I'd trusted most in the world. Christina tried to contact me multiple times. Texts, calls, emails, even a letter delivered to my parents' house. I blocked her number and returned the letter unopened. I had nothing to say to her. James tried too, but less persistently. He sent one long email apologizing, explaining that he'd been confused, that he hadn't meant to fall in love with Christina, but it had just happened. He said he still cared about me and hoped we could eventually be friends. I deleted it without finishing it. I didn't need his explanations or his guilt. I needed him out of my life. Word got around quickly, of course. In the age of social media, nothing stays secret. People who'd attended the wedding started talking. The story spread. I became that bride whose husband cheated on her wedding night. Some people reached out with sympathy. Others ghosted me, apparently not knowing how to deal with my situation. I learned quickly who my real friends were. And through it all, I survived. I woke up every morning even when I wanted to stay in bed forever. I ate meals even when food tasted like nothing. I showered and dressed and pretended to be okay until slowly, gradually, I actually started to be okay. 3 months after the wedding, the annulment was finalized. I was no longer married to James Mitchell. Legally, it was as if our marriage had never existed. I wish I could say the same for my heart. But I was healing. Slowly. I went back to work and threw myself into my projects, designing homes for other people, spaces where they could build happy lives. It was painful sometimes, but it was also therapeutic. I was creating something good, something beautiful, something lasting. And that felt important. 6 months after the wedding, I heard through mutual friends that James and Christina were still together. They'd moved in together in an apartment across town. Part of me felt vindicated, that I hadn't been crazy, that their love was apparently real enough to continue after destroying my life. But mostly, I felt nothing. They were becoming figures from my past, people who mattered less and less with each day that passed. I was building a new life, one that didn't include them. And that life, surprisingly, was starting to feel good. I'd been promoted at work, given more responsibility, more interesting projects. I'd started going to therapy, working through my trust issues and my feelings of inadequacy. I'd reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my relationship with James, women who reminded me that I was more than just someone's wife or girlfriend. I'd started running in the mornings, something I hadn't done since college, and the endorphins helped clear my head. I was becoming myself again. Or maybe I was becoming a new version of myself, someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. 1 year after the wedding that never became a marriage, I heard the first crack in James and Christina's supposedly great love story. A mutual friend mentioned in passing that they'd been fighting a lot, that it wasn't going well, that the reality of their relationship was disappointing compared to the fantasy. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care enough to ask. But I did notice that Christina had stopped posting photos of them together on social media, that James had changed his relationship status from in a relationship to nothing at all. The cracks were showing. Turns out, a relationship built on betrayal and lies doesn't have the strongest foundation. Who knew? Around the same time, something unexpected happened. I met someone. I wasn't looking for it. I'd convinced myself I was done with relationships, that I was better off alone. But fate, apparently, had other plans. It happened at a networking event for architects and developers, one of those industry mixers I usually avoided, but had forced myself to attend. I was standing by the bar, nursing a gin and tonic and trying to look interested in the conversation happening around me, when someone said my name. Rachel Montgomery? I turned, and there was a man I didn't recognize, tall with dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing a well-cut suit and a warm smile. "I'm sorry," I said. "Have we met?" "Daniel Carter," he said, extending his hand. "We haven't met, but I've seen your work. That sustainable housing project you designed in Charlottesville? It's brilliant." We started talking about architecture, about his development company, about the projects we were passionate about. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and easy to talk to. He listened when I spoke and asked real questions, showing genuine interest in my ideas. It was nice. Refreshing. Different from any interaction I'd had in a long time. At the end of the night, he asked if I'd like to have coffee sometime to discuss a potential collaboration. Just professional, he added quickly, seeing something in my face. I'm working on a project that could really benefit from your expertise. I said yes, surprising myself. And that coffee meeting turned into a working relationship, which turned into a friendship, which slowly, carefully, turned into something more. Daniel was patient with me in a way I didn't know I needed. He didn't push, didn't make assumptions, didn't expect anything. He just showed up. Consistently. Honestly. Kindly. When I finally told him about James and Christina, about my disastrous wedding night, he listened without judgment. That must have been devastating, he said simply. I'm sorry you went through that. It was, I admit it. But I survived it. And, honestly, I think I'm better off. He smiled. I think you're probably right. Anyone who would do that isn't worthy of you. It was the first time someone had said that to me, the first time someone had validated my worth rather than making me feel like maybe I'd been lacking something, maybe I hadn't been enough. It felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Daniel and I took things slowly. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekend trips to see new architecture in other cities. Weekend trips turned into quiet nights at his place, talking until dawn about everything and nothing. He never made me feel rushed or pressured. He understood that I was healing, that trust didn't come easily anymore. And somehow, in that patient, gentle way of his, he helped me believe in love again. Not the desperate, all-consuming love I'd thought I had with James. Something steadier. Something real. 2 years after my wedding night, I was a different person entirely. I'd been promoted to senior architect at my firm. I'd designed 3 major projects that had won awards. I'd published an article in Architectural Digest about sustainable design. And I was in a healthy, honest relationship with a man who respected me. Daniel and I had been dating for about 10 months when he met my parents. I was nervous, worried they'd judge him against James, worried they'd see him as rebound or a replacement. But my mother hugged him warmly and whispered to me later, "This one is good, sweetheart. Hold on to him." My father, who'd never quite forgiven James, actually smiled and talked to Daniel about baseball for an hour. It felt like acceptance. It felt like moving forward. How do you feel about it? Daniel asked me that night when I told him. We were sitting on his couch, my feet in his lap, comfortable and safe. Honestly, I said, I feel sorry for that baby. They're being born into a relationship that started with betrayal and lies. That's not a strong foundation for a family. He nodded thoughtfully. Do you ever wish it had been you? Having his baby, I mean. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said, and I meant it. If I'd gotten pregnant during our relationship, I'd be tied to him forever. I'd have to see him, talk to him, co-parent with him. I'd never be free. This way, I got to walk away completely. I got to rebuild my entire life without him in it. That baby isn't a blessing from where I'm sitting. It's a permanent reminder of what they did. Daniel squeezed my foot gently. You're going to be an amazing mother someday. When the time is right, with the right person. The thought made me smile. I'd been so sure I'd never trust anyone enough to have a family. But with Daniel, I could imagine it. Not yet, not soon, but someday. The possibility existed again. A few months later, I heard through this same friend that Christina and James had had a huge fight, that she'd moved back to her parents' house, that the pregnancy was complicated, and they weren't sure if they'd stay together. The friend told me this with a kind of vindictive satisfaction, like I'd be happy to hear that karma was catching up to them. But I wasn't happy. I didn't feel vindicated or satisfied. I just felt sad that a baby was going to be born into that mess, sad that Christina and James had thrown away so much for something that was already crumbling. They deserve each other, my sister said when I told her. They're both terrible people. Maybe, I said. But I'm not going to waste energy hating them. That's just giving them power over me they don't deserve anymore. It was true. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being angry. The rage that had sustained me in those early months had burned itself out, leaving only indifference. They were just people I used to know, people who'd hurt me badly, people I'd moved past. They no longer had the power to affect my mood or my day. That felt like the truest victory. 3 years after the wedding, Daniel and I moved in together. It was a big step for me, terrifying in some ways. Living with someone again, being that vulnerable, trusting someone with my space and my heart and my daily life. But Daniel made it easy. He didn't try to change me or fix me. He just loved me as I was, broken pieces and all. We found a beautiful loft in downtown Richmond, all exposed brick and huge windows. I got to design the space, making it ours, a home that reflected both of us. It felt like the opposite of the life I'd almost had with James. This was real. This was chosen. This was built on honesty. Around the same time, I heard that Christina had the baby. A little girl. There were photos on social media, Christina looking exhausted but happy, James holding his daughter with what looked like genuine tenderness. For a moment, seeing those photos, I felt a pang of something. Not jealousy exactly, but a ghost of the life I'd thought I'd have. The family I'd imagined. But then Daniel came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and kissed my neck, and the pang disappeared. I had everything I needed right here. The baby didn't fix things between Christina and James. Within 6 months, I heard they'd broken up for good. James had apparently cheated on Christina with someone else, unable to remain faithful even to the woman he destroyed my life for. The irony wasn't lost on me. Christina was now a single mother, living with her parents, working part-time, and raising a baby alone. James had moved out of state for a new job, seeing his daughter only on scheduled weekends, paying child support but otherwise absent from the daily realities of parenthood. Everything they'd wanted, everything they'd thought their great love would bring them, had turned to dust. I should have felt vindicated. Part of me did. But mostly, I just felt sad for that little girl, growing up with parents who couldn't be in the same room without fighting, growing up hearing stories about how her existence began with lies. That child deserved better. Everyone does. Life continued. I kept designing buildings. Daniel's company kept growing. We traveled to Europe, to Japan, to places I'd always wanted to see. We adopted a golden retriever we named Scout. We hosted dinner parties and game nights with friends. We built a life that was quiet and happy and real. Sometimes weeks would go by without me thinking about James or Christina or that awful wedding night. And when I did think about it, it was distant, like something that had happened to someone else. The wound had healed, leaving only a faint scar, reminder of what I'd survived. For years after the wedding, Daniel proposed. We were in Paris, walking along the Seine at sunset when he got down on one knee. "Rachel Montgomery," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "you are the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known. You've taught me what it means to love someone with complete honesty and trust. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" I said yes through happy tears, and he slid a simple, elegant ring onto my finger. Not the massive diamond James had given me, the one I'd left behind at Willowbrook Estate. This was a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, unique and beautiful and so perfectly suited to me that I knew Daniel had put real thought into it. "I know the idea of getting married again might be scary," Daniel said after we'd celebrated with champagne, sitting at a cafe watching the sunset paint the sky. "If you want to just be engaged for a while, or if you want a long engagement, or if you'd rather not have a wedding at all, I understand. I just want you. However you want to do this." I loved him even more for saying that, for understanding without me having to explain. "I want to get married," I said. But I wanted to be different. Small. Intimate. No big production, no venue rentals, no wedding party. Just us and the people who truly matter. He smiled. "That sounds perfect." We got married 6 months later in my parents' backyard. 20 people attended, our parents, siblings, closest friends. I wore a simple cream dress, not white, not a traditional wedding gown. Daniel wore a suit. There were wildflowers and string lights, and our friend who was an officiant. It was the opposite of the wedding I'd had with James, and that was exactly what made it perfect. When the officiant asked if we took each other, I said I do, without hesitation, looking into Daniel's eyes and seeing nothing but love and honesty and commitment. When we kissed, it wasn't performative or for the cameras. It was real. That night, in the small bed and breakfast we'd rented for our wedding night, Daniel held me close and said, "Thank you for trusting me enough to do this again." "Thank you for being worthy of that trust," I replied. We spent our wedding night talking, laughing, making love, and falling asleep in each other's arms. Everything that should have happened on my first wedding night, everything I'd been denied. And this time, it was real. About a year into my marriage to Daniel, something unexpected happened. I ran into Christina. It was at a coffee shop in downtown Richmond, completely random. I was picking up an afternoon coffee, and there she was, standing in line with a toddler in a stroller. The little girl, about 2 years old now, was babbling and playing with a stuffed elephant. Christina looked tired, older than she should have, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw me, her face went pale. "Rachel," she said, and her voice cracked. I looked at her, this woman who'd once been my best friend, and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just emptiness where our friendship used to be. "Christina," I said neutrally. We stood there awkwardly. The line moved forward and we moved with it. "How are you?" she finally asked, her voice small. "I'm good," I said. "Really good." "I heard you got married," she said, looking down at my ring. "Congratulations." "Thank you." More silence. The barista called for the next customer. It was Christina's turn. "Can we talk?" she asked suddenly, desperately. "Please?" "I know I don't deserve it, but I've wanted to apologize to you for years." To really apologize. To explain. I looked at her daughter, innocent and oblivious, playing with her toy. "I don't need an explanation," I said quietly. "What happened, happened. It's in the past." "Please," she said again, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I need you to know how sorry I am. I need you to know that I've thought about what I did every single day for 4 years. I destroyed our friendship. I destroyed your wedding. I destroyed everything for a relationship that was doomed from the start." "Christina," I said, cutting her off, "I forgave you a long time ago. Not for your sake, but for mine." Carrying anger was exhausting, and I needed to let it go so I could move on. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back in my life. What we had is gone. It died that night, and there's no bringing it back. Her tears were falling now, and her daughter looked up, concerned. "Mama," the little girl said. "I understand," Christina whispered. I needed you to know that James and I aren't together anymore. That the relationship I destroyed your life for fell apart within 2 years. That I'm a single mother who lost her best friend, her reputation, and her self-respect for a man who cheated on me the same way he cheated on you." "I heard," I said. "And I'm sorry your daughter is paying the price for our mistakes." "Our mistakes," she repeated. "Rachel, you didn't do anything wrong. This was all me and James. You were innocent." "I know," I said. "But I appreciate you saying it." The barista called her name. Her coffee was ready. "I should go," Christina said. "But Rachel, for what it's worth, I am genuinely happy that you found happiness. You deserved so much better than what we did to you." "I know that now," I said. "Goodbye, Christina." I watched her gather her coffee, maneuver her stroller toward the door, and leave. And then I ordered my coffee and went back to work, back to my real life, the life I'd built from the ashes of the worst night of my life. A few months after that encounter, I was in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Rachel, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. His name is James Mitchell." My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen James in over 4 years. Hadn't heard his voice, hadn't been in the same room with him. For a moment, I considered telling my assistant to send him away. But curiosity won. "Send him in," I said, and hated that my hands were shaking slightly as I prepared for him to walk through my door. When he did, I barely recognized him. He'd aged badly, with lines around his eyes and gray streaking through his hair. He wore jeans and a wrinkled button-down, a far cry from the polished businessman I'd married. He looked worn down, defeated. Rachel, he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Thank you for seeing me. I have a meeting in 15 minutes, I said, keeping my voice professional and cold. What do you want? He walked in, closed the door, and sat down across from my desk without being invited. I needed to see you. To apologize. I don't know, to try to explain what happened. James, it's been for years, I said. What could you possibly have to say now that matters? I made the biggest mistake of my life, he said, and his voice cracked. Letting you go. Hurting you the way I did. I was an idiot, Rachel. I was confused and stupid, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. I stared at him, incredulous. Is this a joke? Did you seriously come here to tell me you regret cheating on me on our wedding night? For years later. I know it's too late, he said quickly. I know you're married now, and I saw your husband once, and he seems like a good guy. But I needed you to know that I think about you every day. That I miss you. That if I could go back and change everything, I would. Well, you can't, I said flatly. Time travel doesn't exist. You made your choices, I made mine, and we both have to live with them. Are you happy? He asked, and there was something desperate in the question. With him? Are you really happy? Deliriously, I said, and I meant it. Daniel is everything you could never be. He's honest, faithful, kind, and he sees me as a partner, not a performance. So yes, James, I'm happy. Happier than I ever was with you. His face crumpled. I deserved that. You deserve worse than that, I said. You know what you did to me? You didn't just break my heart. You made me doubt my worth, my judgment, my ability to trust. You made me question if I'd been stupid or blind or somehow not enough. It took me years to realize that none of it was my fault. That I didn't fail. You did. I know, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And Christina? I continued. Did you love her? Or was she just available and willing? He looked down. I thought I loved her. But it was just infatuation, just the thrill of something forbidden. We had nothing in common. We fought constantly. Once the excitement wore off, there was nothing left. She got pregnant and I tried to make it work, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready to be a father, wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. So you abandoned your daughter, I said, disgust clear in my voice. Just like you abandoned me. I pay child support, he said defensively. I see her on weekends. That's the bare minimum, James. That's not being a father. That little girl deserves better. I know, he said again. Everything in my life is a mess, Rachel. My job is terrible. I'm living in a studio apartment. I barely see my daughter. I have no friends left because everyone knows what I did. And every day, I think about how different things would be if I hadn't ruined everything. Good, I said coldly. I hope you think about it every single day. I hope it haunts you. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. Do you hate me? I considered the question honestly. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I nothing you. You're just a guy I used to know who treated me badly. You don't have any power over me anymore. You're just nothing. That seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. I should go, he said, standing up. I'm sorry for bothering you. I needed to see you one more time. To tell you I'm sorry. Apology noted, I said. But not accepted. Not because I'm holding a grudge, but because I simply don't care enough to accept or reject it. It doesn't matter to me anymore, James. You don't matter to me anymore. He nodded slowly, turned, and walked to the door. Before he left, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found happiness. You deserve it. Then he was gone. I sat at my desk for a moment, processing the encounter. Then I picked up my phone and texted Daniel, "You free for lunch?" I love you. He responded immediately, always. Love you too. See you in 20. I smiled, closed my laptop, and left my office. James was my past. Daniel was my future. And I knew with absolute certainty which one mattered. That evening, I told Daniel about James's visit. We were making dinner together in our kitchen, working side by side in comfortable harmony. How do you feel? He asked, chopping vegetables. About seeing him again? Honestly? I feel nothing, I said. It was like seeing a stranger. Someone I used to know in another life. He doesn't affect me anymore. That's good, Daniel said. That means you've really healed. I have, I agreed. And it's because of you. Because you showed me what love is supposed to look like. He put down his knife and pulled me into a hug. I didn't heal you, Rachel. You healed yourself. I just had the privilege of being there while you did. I held him tight, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling grateful for this life, this man, this second chance at happiness. 5 years after my disastrous wedding to James, Daniel and I decided to start trying for a baby. It was terrifying and exciting in equal measure. I'd once thought I'd have James's babies, that we'd raise a family together. Now I couldn't imagine anything worse. But with Daniel, I could picture it. Late-night feedings, first steps, school plays, all of it. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. When I told Daniel, he cried, something I'd only seen him do once before, on our wedding day. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We're going to be parents." 9 months later, we welcomed our daughter into the world. We named her Claire, after my grandmother. She had Daniel's dark hair and my eyes, and when she looked up at me for the first time, I felt a love so overwhelming it was almost frightening. This tiny person, this perfect little human, was ours. We created her from love and trust and honesty. Everything James and I had never had. As I held Claire in the hospital, with Daniel beside me looking at his daughter with pure adoration, I thought about that awful wedding night 5 years ago. The betrayal, the pain, the feeling that my life was over. If someone had told me then that I'd end up here, happily married to a wonderful man, with a beautiful daughter and a successful career, I wouldn't have believed them. I couldn't have imagined that the worst night of my life would actually be the catalyst for the best years of my life. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked softly, noticing my faraway expression. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am," I said. "For all of it. Even the painful parts. Because they led me here. To a hospital room at 3 a.m. covered in various bodily fluids," he joked. I laughed. "Exactly here. Exactly this. I wouldn't change a thing." And I meant it. The last I heard about James and Christina was about a year after Claire was born. A mutual friend mentioned in passing that James had moved back to Virginia, that he was trying to be more involved in his daughter's life, that he and Christina were attempting to co-parent civilly. I hoped, for their daughter's sake, that they'd figure it out. Every child deserves parents who can be in the same room without World War III breaking out. But it wasn't my problem anymore. It wasn't my story. My story was Claire's first birthday party, held in our backyard with our closest friends and family. My story was Daniel reading bedtime stories in funny voices that made our daughter giggle. My story was designing a new community center that would serve underprivileged families. My story was waking up next to the man I loved and feeling nothing but peace and gratitude. I never saw James or Christina again after those brief encounters. They became truly part of my past, people I used to know, characters in a story I sometimes told about resilience and healing. On the 6th anniversary of that terrible wedding night, Daniel and I went out to dinner, just the two of us, while my parents watched Claire. Over wine and good food, Daniel raised his glass. "A toast," he said. "To?" I asked. "To bad weddings," he said with a smile. "Because without yours, I never would have found you." I laughed and clinked my glass against his. "To bad weddings," I agreed. "And to second chances. And to the fact that you're the love of my life," he added. "Always and forever." We'd been through this story 100 times, but what you need to understand is this. My happy ending didn't come from revenge. It didn't come from James and Christina's relationship falling apart or from their suffering. It came from me choosing to rebuild, to trust again, to open my heart to the possibility that not everyone would hurt me the way they did. It came from recognizing that I deserved better and refusing to settle for anything less. If you're watching this and you've been betrayed, if you've had your heart broken by someone you trusted, I want you to know something. It's not the end of your story. It feels like it is. God knows, sitting in that hallway at 3 a.m., I thought my life was over. But it wasn't. It was just the end of one chapter and the beginning of a better one. You will survive this. You will heal. You will love again. And one day, you'll look back on the worst night of your life and realize it was actually the night you became the person you were always meant to be. 7 years after that wedding night, I'm sitting on my back porch watching Daniel push Claire on her swing set, her squeals of delight filling the evening air. I have a successful architecture firm with my name on the door. I have a marriage built on trust and honesty. I have a daughter who will grow up seeing what real love looks like. I have everything I thought I'd lost that terrible night. And more importantly, I have myself back. The woman who was strong enough to walk away. The woman who refused to let betrayal define her. The woman who chose to heal rather than to hate. Sometimes people ask me if I would change anything about what happened. If I could go back and somehow prevent James and Christina's betrayal, would I? And my answer is always the same, no. Because that pain, that betrayal, that awful wedding night, they made me who I am. They taught me what I truly wanted, what I truly deserved. They led me to Daniel, to Claire, to this life. I wouldn't trade this life for anything, not even to erase the pain of the past. So to James and Christina, wherever you are, I hope you've found some measure of peace. I hope you've learned from your mistakes. I hope you're being better people, better parents. I don't wish you ill. I don't wish you anything at all. You're just part of my history now, a closed chapter in a story that continues to unfold in beautiful and unexpected ways. And to everyone who's watched this video, who's listened to my story, I want to say thank you. Thank you for bearing witness to my pain and my healing. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is exactly what you need to become who you're meant to be. Did you like my story? Let's meet in the comments. Where are you watching from? What's your story of betrayal and recovery? I'd love to hear from you. If this story meant something to you, if it helped you in any way, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to Bridal Confessions. We share real wedding stories, dramatic moments, and most importantly, stories of survival and strength. Your support means everything and helps us bring more stories like this to people who need them. Thank you so much, from the bottom of my heart. Remember, your worst moment is not your final moment. Your story isn't over. The best chapters might still be waiting to be written. See you in the next confession. With love and hope, always.